so we've established at length how Hitchcock has cemented himself in his place in film history, but watching these movies, I've seen two of them now, so I'm nowhere near a Hitchcock buff. But one thing I've noticed is the way that he's like woven himself into the fabric of America, right? Like I really was realizing like Hitchcock is as much a part of Americana as like the places and things that we see in his movies. And I just thought that was really either it was just luck for him that he was allowed to shoot in the places that he was, or if it was a conscious effort on his part to make sure that we're shooting things at Mount Rushmore and in front of the Golden Gate Bridge and in all, in all these different places. And I don't know. I just thought that was really interesting. And also the prevalence of alcohol in his plots so far. I mean, glaringly in this one, the poor guy has to drink a pint of bourbon. Now, Matt, I know you're not a drinker. Bourbon is my favorite drink.
What are you talking about? I've got my Dr. Pepper cream soda right here, Tyler.
Well, imagine if I force fed that to you. Jake, I don't know.
He'd be just fine. It's a diet.
Oh, that's right.
He could drink 10 of them. It wouldn't affect him at all.
But I don't know. I was thinking about, alcohol, for better or for worse, is a huge part of American culture. I know for me personally, I judge a city by like the access to bars. I love hanging out in bars, maybe more so in my 20s than I do now with gray in my beard. But I was just wondering, it was like if there's like a chicken or the egg effect here. Like, is alcohol such an important part of our culture because of movies like this, or is it in movies like this because it's such an important part of our culture? And I don't have an answer, and I don't expect you guys to answer that, but it's just something I've been noticing. And just the way that, like, when you think of Hollywood and you think of movies, like Hitchcock is one of the things that one of the people you'll think of, and Hollywood is such a part of the American story. And so I really love how it's all kind of tied together through his craft. And I'm curious, I put this prompt in our chat thread, and it looks like you guys took some different directions on this. But so I'll just throw this to you, and you guys can talk about whatever it is you want to talk about. And Jake, our guest, you're going to go first.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because Hitchcock's British, right?
Right.
So he comes and sometimes I think that helps people see America a little bit more clearly because they don't have necessarily, they weren't brought up in it.
Right.
So he comes over and he's able to really grab on these threads that for his purposes are kind of some of the seedier, maybe scarier bits. He can kind of grab the psyche of America and say, what's scary to people? And he taps into Psycho, where it's basically just your safety at any given time when you're doing something innocuous. There might be some lunatic who will just murder you in the shower when you think you're safe. He taps into, for North by Northwest, he taps into like being falsely accused or getting pulled up into something that you're not really prepared to handle. Granted, it's Cary Grant and the dude's hot and awesome, so he does just fine. But I think that he was able to kind of see and kind of grab some of the threads of Americana. And it's interesting talking about kind of the alcohol thing. And I don't know if it's okay to bring up books on a movie podcast. Is that okay? With you guys? Okay, I appreciate that.
It does violate one of our rules of Movie Club, but you're a guest. We'll allow it.
I appreciate you giving me this mulligan. But if you guys are interested, there's a series of books by an author called Raymond Chandler, and he basically invented detective noir. It kind of, he started writing these books in the 40s and 50s about a private detective in LA, in Hollywood. And so it's kind of an interesting counterpoint to this, or almost a companion, not even a counterpoint, because all of these themes are kind of strewn throughout it, of alcohol being kind of a major point in some of his books. I'm reading one right now where there's an author who's super alcoholic, and it ties in, and a lot of the plots happen in bars and in things and speakeasies. And he kind of, you can see the kind of the prohibition, just kind of the ripple effects of prohibition on society. I think that Hitchcock pulls a lot of that in too. And we can kind of see that throughout the rest of his works. But I think that's that's a really interesting way to look at Hitchcock as a reflection of Americana and what we value and what we fear. I think that he dives into that a lot.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point where, he can see us from the outside in. It's really hard to see yourself from the outside in. And so the fact that I'm sure he was studying Americans in a way that Americans don't study themselves. I think he's used it to great success. Matt, what did you think about all this?
Yeah, I mean, and part of it, like, given the time frame and his experience in like Hollywood and coming to America, like part of it probably wasn't even studying. It was just observation. Like Jake said, like the ramifications of Prohibition era. Like, as I had a professor in college who was from Sierra Leone, and he always said, like, Americans feel like they own the world, and like we don't look at anything, we don't think about anything other than like American history. And so the idea that like we don't think about the ramifications that Prohibition had on American society and culture, whereas like in like Europe, like they don't have those similar ramifications because they didn't go through it.
Right.
And so I feel like alcohol to some extent was like put on a pedestal and became kind of ritzier than it was in Europe. And so we have these nice cabinets with, nice, they make it more of an experience. Yeah. And there's a little more to it in the culture. And so I think it was like a product of the time. And you see stuff from that era, like Mad Men. Again, you have like an advertising guy, and just in the office, they have just like copious amounts of alcohol at their disposal at any given time. And so I feel like it was just a part of the era. And I don't know if Hitchcock was influencing it or influenced by it, but it is interesting that it's in, a lot of his movies.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because now that I'm thinking about this, like, I mean, the Prohibition was a big deal in America, like we had the bootleggers and it was this whole thing. That's what the mob, they were running booze. It wasn't the hard drugs of today. It was, simple old whiskey. And I feel like, Americans feel like it's like the thing we won back. It's like the thing we own. And we're not for those that have traveled, you'll know that if you ever run into an Australian at a hostel, like those guys are going for it. They're going to be drinking, or, I've been drank under the table by some Canadians in Amsterdam. And, so we're not the only country that reveres alcohol, but it's just interesting to me to watch every single scene they work in a drink. And it's such a big part of both of the main characters that I've seen so far in a Hitchcock movie. But that's very good, astute observations from both Jake and Matt. 2 points for each of you. It's a new thing we're doing now.
Thank you, Tyler.
Ben, what did you go
anyway? I've always felt that what this podcast needed was to be more like Around the Horn on ESPN.
Well, we just did it.
I thought I had shot a 3, but I guess my foot was on the line.
It was a 2. It's a great shot.
I need to know who wins, who won. Well, I mean, I feel like you can put me up for a donut on this because I don't know that I have anything as valuable as what they said. But as far as Hitchcock's influence, I think, when it comes to the landmarks, I think we probably saw more of that in film.